Alright everyone, so I'm going to show you guys how to color blend with the acrylic paints. Now remember when it comes to the acrylic paints and like the fancier types of art materials, you kind of get what you pay for. And so I am using cheap paint that I found at like a cheapy store. I only spent $5 on like 12 pieces, 12 colors of paint. My brush, however, is a brush that I have been using for a while. So you want to have like a good brush. I'm going to start off with the white and I'm just going to put like a layer of white paint on my canvas, okay? And while the white paint is wet, I'm going to be adding in the yellow paint on top of it. So I'm using my colors in order from lightest to darkest. And this is kind of where I realized that this paint is kind of cheap because usually with acrylic paints, you don't need a lot of paint in order to spread it around. And I found out with this paint, the cheaper paint, where it's very thin, very watery, you need to have a lot of paint on your canvas so that way you can kind of spread it around, but also at the same time keep that bright color. Okay, so just like with our colors, our crayons, our color pencils, um, we're gonna kind of pull and paint that yellow paint a little higher than we normally would. And I'm going to get a little bit of the red paint. And again, this is where I kind of realized this is really, really thin paint because you can't even see the red at all. And so I started to actually add in a little bit more red. But usually with your acrylic paints, you want to have less of the darker color to start with. So that way, if you do make a mistake, it's easier to, of course, fix it. Okay. Again, with the acrylic paints, once the acrylic paint dries, you have to wait for it to dry. You will be able to paint over it. Okay. And so here I was really trying to get a nice orange color and it wasn't really working for me. So I started to just add more paint. Okay. And of course the more wet that your paint is, the easier it's going to be for you to blend. But at the same time, if you have too much paint on your canvas, you start to get like these little chunky areas of paint that you can't really pull in any direction. And so you have to be careful and make sure that you are spreading that paint evenly across your canvas. And so you can see I kind of apply the paint in like different areas and then I go over it back and forth from one side to the other side horizontally. Okay, now I'm adding in the blue, and again, you can see how thin this paint actually is because the blue didn't even really like fill in the texture of the canvas. And that's another thing you have to keep into consideration is the texture of the canvas. You need enough paint to press the color of the acrylic paint into each of those little grooves of your canvas. And you can still see that blue's having a real hard time um, getting on the canvas and actually spreading through the canvas. And so you just kind of have to work with it, add those colors back and forth. Notice I'm not cleaning my paintbrush, okay? Not cleaning my paintbrush. I'm keeping that even stroke from left to right, one side of the canvas to the other horizontally. And then I'm adding in the rest of the blue here at the top. And I kind of just got frustrated and I added in almost all of my blue, which it actually worked. It kind of like filled it in for me. And so you just have to be careful. Okay, so again, horizontal strokes from left to right. Be careful since we're not cleaning our brush. I ended up having a lot of extra like blue on my paintbrush. If you decide to go back to the bottom, you are going to have to clean your brush because now you're going to be working with those lighter colors. And I made a little mark there on the bottom so you could see. Um, this acrylic paint was so thin and watery that I literally just wiped it off with my finger. Okay, and then I took the white paint and started all over again, lightest color with my white, and then I added my yellow again on top. And the bottom, the yellow paint had actually started to dry a little bit, and so you can see that the yellow is actually starting to look a lot brighter. Okay, and then I accidentally added too much red in that one little spot, and so just like Bob Ross, I kind of made a happy little accident and I decided to kind of go with it and started to add in almost like little like spurts of yellow inside of the red. I thought it would look good and it didn't, so I decided to go in a different route and I kind of got lost in this painting. And so the rest of this video is just kind of me quickly throwing together a painting and I actually turned it into like an actual sunset scene I kind of go through and I add the horizon line of the water and I start adding in the reflection in the ocean and the water, and then I start adding in some clouds. Okay, so you just kind of have to go through. You got to play with it. This whole entire painting was created while the paint was still somewhat sort of wet. Of course, the more wet that your paint is that's on the canvas, the easier it's going to be to mix those colors. Once it starts to dry, you're not going to be able to mix the colors on the canvas. So you have to be very careful. You have to be mindful of your speed. You can see as I started making my way up with the clouds that some of those clouds started to turn like the purples and the pinks because those paint colors underneath the clouds were still wet. Okay, and so you just got to work with it. You got to experiment with it, and that's what art is all about, right? Is making those mistakes, learning from those mistakes, experimenting, and seeing what works for you. So keep trying, keep experimenting. And again, this is the video of how you color blend with acrylic paints on a canvas. Thanks for watching.